From the New Arts and Media Studios in Milwaukee, I'm Charles Purcell. This is The Log. Well, this is my first chance to talk with you about the Super Bowl. I'm going to make an effort not to repeat 100 things you've already heard. All right, I just want to give you my take. First of all, my entire social media feed was all about the halftime show and almost nothing about the game. It was about 99-1. So that was fun. Super Bowl Sunday, to me, just represents and celebrates the very worst of America. I hate Super Bowl Sunday. The money, the spectacle, all of it's just so over the top. The buying, the selling, it's all fast and loud and violent and gaudy, and then when it does attempt to, especially in the commercials and in the pregame interviews about some player who overcame a tough childhood and they get all maudlin and sentimental, and they do this in the commercials when they try to go with the whole sort of values angle. It's all, work hard and push harder and succeed at all costs and be the best. It just turns into a bootstrap mentality. It turns into maudlin sentimentality, celebrating, my parents were poor and they worked 7 jobs and my dad ran away and my mom, it's just awful. It's Horatio Alger, it's pull yourself up by your own bootstraps. It's aren't we wonderful? I just hate Super Bowl Sunday. It's the very, very worst that America has to offer. Now, there's another side of this coin, and I should have gotten to it quicker. There's so much about the American people that I adore. The artists of the Super Bowl were fantastic. Coco Jones was great. She sang Lift Every Voice and Sing. Of course, Bad Bunny was just amazing, just fantastic. And you've heard all you need to hear about that. You don't need that from me. I'm going to give you just a couple of personal thoughts, though. Now, I've recommended statehood for Puerto Rico many times, but I don't want to get ahead of the Puerto Rican people. And also, I would welcome them as a state, but I would not advocate for that under current conditions, God forbid, where they would be discriminated against under the regime. I mean, their possible statehood, for me, would have to be accompanied by the reforms that you and I are always talking about. Now, as it relates to Bad Bunny's Super Bowl halftime, Ricky Martin sang in Spanish, the Hawaiian song, that Warning. Bad Bunny himself carried, at the very beginning, the Puerto Rican flag with the light blue instead of the darker blue, which I've learned, didn't know before this, that was the flag before the U.S. takeover, and it symbolizes independence. And more Puerto Ricans want independence. They want to be an independent nation. When they would take the polls only a few years ago, that contingent was in small single digits. The most recent poll, statehood is preferred by about 59% of Puerto Rican voters. Something called free association by about 30%, and then complete independence by 12%. As I understand this free association, it's kind of like, not exactly Denmark and Greenland, independence, autonomy, but some security and trade guarantees, something like that. Don't ask me for any more detail, I'm not sure. Almost nobody in Puerto Rico wants the current relationship. There are a few, but practically nobody. So I just wanted to say that about Puerto Rico. And the Bad Bunny show itself was just pure wonderful. Talking about the artists now at the Super Bowl, which I was very pleased with. Brandi Carlile sang America the Beautiful, which is my favorite of the so-called patriotic songs. I'll tell you why in a minute. But first I want to mention, I got to shout out Sister Strings, a Milwaukee duo, accompanied her on cello and violin, and we love Sister Strings. Shout out to them. They used to live right here in the neighborhood, across the street from me in River West. America the Beautiful, if you don't know, based on a poem by Catherine Lee Bates, who was a socialist. Yeah, she was a progressive, very big into social justice advocacy. wrote the poem in 1983 as a call for reform, especially when it comes to hoarded wealth versus the common good, opposed to the rugged individualism of America. Yeah, it's a very radical song. Green Day kind of copped out a little bit. They skipped some of the more direct lyrics. Yeah, so they're being criticized for chickening out. But you know what? They sang Holiday and they sang American Idiot on America's Greatest Stage. So, come on. That's still great. As for the alternate program, the Turning Point USA, I've not much to say about that except it was a joke. And there's all sorts of alternative programming to the halftime show. They've been doing that for years. Different networks, they came up with the Puppy Bowl. Remember the famous In Living Color special back in the 90s? Well, probably not. You're not old enough to remember that. But there's a dozen at least, or more. So having alternative programming is not the bad thing. The whole point of the Turning Point USA All-American alternative was just pure unadulterated racism. And I have nothing more to say about that. So my disgust of Super Bowl Sunday is tempered, more than tempered, in fact, overtaken by my joy in the arts. Artists are the best people. They do wonderful things for us. And the people themselves, who I always say around here, the so-called good Americans versus the bad Americans, and it's a spectrum, I understand. But just for the sake of brevity here, the good Americans outnumber the bad Americans by, 100 to 1, 1,000 to 1, 1,000,000 to 1. Here's a new data point for us. The Bad Bunny halftime show got, I've heard different numbers, 140 million versus 5 to maybe 7 million viewers for the racist one. 140 to 5. That's a pretty good ratio. The good people outnumber the bad people. We're not a 50-50 nation. Stop it. We're not. And that's the bottom line for me. It's the people, stupid. To borrow James Carville's famous line, it's the economy, stupid. Yeah, it's the people, stupid. It's the people. The lessons we can take from this weird, over-the-top Super Bowl weekend is that it's all about the people. This is why I'm a social anarchist. People over profits. People over government. Yes, of course, bad people exist. That will always be true. But a better system will create more better people. That's worded badly, not more better. Let me try to say that more better. A better system will create a greater number of better people. Because the racists today are enabled by the power structure. Greed is enabled by power. Violence is enabled by power. And when government has a monopoly on power, it's in a unique position to influence the culture. And this, if I can use another dangerous expression, is just classic Marxism. If a system rewards violence, rewards greed, rewards racism, it will create more of those tendencies in the people. Or if the term Marxism just freaks you out and you can't get beyond it, think of it in the biopsychosocial sense. We're all an amalgam, each of us, of our biology. That's just what we're born with. That's what's in our brain. That's what's in our bodies. Our psychology, that's the sort of the classic Freudian, how we're raised, influence from our parents, all of that. And then it's the social. And that's everything else. It's the environment we live in. It's the country we live in. It's the government and the laws we have to follow. It's the way we have to succeed or at least survive in a particular economic system. These are all the social forces on us. And it shapes us. Nobody's a Superman. Each of us is impacted by biopsychosocial forces. So when a particular government, based on greed, violence, and racism, controls everything, it's going to shape the people trying to succeed and survive. A bad system can do a great deal of damage. And miracle of miracles, as I said a minute ago, most of us are still good people. It's evident, it's clear. The bad people have never outnumbered the good people. But we're living in a time where the power elite have gotten so out of hand, they're threatening to tip that scale. But then on the other hand, imagine, just please close your eyes and imagine for a minute if the people had the power. Imagine a real democracy, a true democracy, where the laws enacted by a representative government actually reflected the values of the people. Imagine the impact on the culture. Imagine the impact on racist people, on greedy people, on violent people, when the system they live in no longer rewards their behavior, but instead it rewards nonviolence. It rewards inclusion, cooperation, diversity, equality, and prosperity for all. This is why I'm a social anarchist. And this is why, all things considered, what happened at the 2026 Super Bowl halftime show was a beautiful confirmation of not only what we should be, but what we certainly can be. So thanks to all the people who made it happen. Thanks to all the people who loved it. I'm going to allow myself to be happy here, just for a minute. Okay, members of the We Hate the Epstein Story Club. We got to talk about it for a little bit. As you know, I've been saying consistently that we're just going about it all wrong. I don't know how exposing files somehow forces or bullies the Department of Justice into bringing charges that they've already decided not to bring. But maybe I'm wrong about that. I could be wrong. I mean, I don't have any better solutions. So let's assume for a minute that I am wrong. Okay, let's jump on the bandwagon just for today and see how it feels. Yeah, expose names. Expose emails and details and shame people. I mean, it's working in the UK. Hell, Keir Starmer might lose his position as Prime Minister. He's already fired his Chief of Staff and Communications Director, Ambassador to the United States. Hell, they're yelling at the king. So I don't know. Maybe. The other thing about this story, it just keeps growing and growing and growing, especially for those of us who admittedly didn't want to follow it from the beginning. Some of us are catching up. I totally confess to that. I'm beginning to be very impressed with the size of this story. This is, if the Pentagon Papers had a baby with the Pandora Papers, it would be the Epstein files. I don't know. This is a clumsy analogy. Yeah, of course, remember the Pentagon Papers were just earth-shattering in what they revealed. The Pandora Papers, if you don't remember, it was back in 2021. It was this massive, record-breaking investigation, and it exposed all the secret offshore financial dealings of over 300 world leaders and celebrities and billionaires, and oh, the embarrassment. But nothing ever came of it. There were no charges filed, and nobody went to jail. It was just a horrible, horrible expose of horrible, horrible people. And then somehow it just dwindled away out of the news cycle, and that was it. And the same thing happened earlier. A few years earlier, we had the Panama Papers, and we also had the Paradise Papers. Similar stories. And for me, the Epstein files is just bringing this back. We're discovering, like Claude Rains in Casablanca, that there's gambling going on. We're shocked at the privilege of these obscenely rich white men. When the hell are we going to do something about it? Now, this story, of course, has at its center the trafficking of young girls and the rape of young girls, which puts it into a whole nother category. If we can't find our way to insist on justice, who are we? On Monday of this week, Ghislaine Maxwell testified in front of Congress and, of course, just pleaded the fifth on every question. I'm not sure what the purpose was to even bring her in. I don't know. According to Virginia Giuffre's book, Maxwell was worse than Epstein. She was a monster. Howard Nuttlick, the regime's Secretary of Commerce. How does he still have a job when it's revealed this week that he lied about his relationship with Epstein? Actually went to the island with his family, with his wife and kids, and he also testified. I think was it on Tuesday? Yeah, I went to the island just for a short lunch. We were on vacation. It was myself and my wife and my kids and several nannies. And then he said something very strange. He said when they left the island, he left with all of his kids and all of the nannies. Huh? Like there was a chance you might leave one or two behind on Pedo Island? I mean, what the hell? And then we learned that Epstein had asked Nuttlick about one of his nannies. And then somehow we find in the possession of Epstein that nanny's resume. This is just... How does Howard Nuttlick still have a job? Starting Monday of this week, members of Congress have been allowed to view unredacted files at a SCIF inside the walls of the DOJ. They're not supposed to tell us anything, they learned. They certainly can't take pictures or make copies, anything like that. But Ro Khanna came out Tuesday morning to the floor of the House and named names. And it's strange. I looked through so many stories before I could find the names. Most articles on this story are not naming the names. Took me a while. Ro Khanna named men identified as co-conspirators in the DOJ files. And they are billionaire Leslie Wexner, former owner of Victoria's Secret, Sultan Ahmed bin Sulayem, the chief executive officer of DP World. Excuse me if I pronounce these names incorrectly. He also named Salvatore Nuara, Zurab Mikaladze, Leonik Leonov, and Nicola Caputo. Again, I probably butchered those names, but you can look them up. Yeah, all of them are identified in the DOJ files as co-conspirators. And we've been told now several times that DOJ has chosen not to pursue any more charges on anybody. So Ro Khanna doesn't have extra evidence, but he wonders why these names were redacted. Because they were redacted in what the public got. I don't know what kind of trouble Ro Khanna is going to get into by naming these names, or what kind of trouble I'm putting myself into. I don't know. And just to remind you, approximately 3 million documents released, comes out to something like 50 million pages, and that's only a little more than half. And we're on day, 50 plus past the December 19th deadline. So every day that passes is Pam Blondy's Department of Injustice breaking the law. And when I said earlier, this thing just keeps getting bigger and bigger. For the uninitiated, and that's kind of what I'm here for today, just to sort of commiserate with my fellow initiates. Epstein, did you ever see the movie The Apartment? Classic Billy Wilder movie, 1960, with Jack Lemmon and Shirley MacLaine. Jack Lemmon plays a character named C.C. Baxter, who's a low-level executive at some big advertising firm. And he arranges for his bosses the scheduling of a downtown apartment where they can have their little liaisons with the secretaries. Don't worry, it has a happy ending. He has a moral reckoning, and he and Shirley MacLaine, well, I won't give you the whole ending, but anyway. Epstein is like a global C.C. Baxter. He was a rounder and a bounder. He was the Forrest Gump of everything. He had friends in finance, entertainment, academia, and most of all, in espionage. And even though I'm the last person to call an expert on this topic, here's what I do know. I do know that the Western press is entirely ignoring The espionage angle. Oh my God, he had ties to Putin, Epstein did, Russian intelligence, Mossad, the Israeli intelligence agency. He was a fixer. He was a professional blackmailer. And that's where all these Venn diagram circles come together. Russian intelligence, of course, famous for compromat. And Epstein somehow had the talent, the connections, the personality. I don't know. He had that magic, I guess, to get people together, to get people to listen to him, to get them to give him power. And so he's meddling in global politics, in espionage, in compromat. And he's luring these rich, entitled white men into this lurid, heinous world of child rape and ensnaring them in his web of extortion and blackmail. And to varying degrees, they all went willingly or were coerced or finagled. As I'm sure you know by now, Epstein had no academic degree, he had no credentials, he had nothing. And yet he controlled the fortunes of billionaires. He owned a private island. He had access to presidents and prime ministers and crown princes. His resume certainly didn't reflect all of this wealth and success. None of it makes sense. But he had a talent, and he found willing partners, and he became a billionaire doing it, and he controlled others' billions. And then when he was caught, first in just financial shenanigans, and then in his heinous sex crimes, he somehow weaseled out every time. And people like Howard Nuttlick and others continued to avail themselves of his services years after he was a convicted pedophile sex criminal. So there were 100 opportunities to stop the guy, to put him away, and he kept popping up again, until finally his luck ran out and somebody had him killed. It's got to be the Orange Menace. Who else could it be? So again, if you've been following this story, you haven't learned anything from me today. This was kind of a private session for my little club. The people who hate this story, who've been avoiding it, and we're late to the table. Okay? I fully confess that. And I hope to God we can find some resolution. I've always expressed deep sorrow and sympathy for the victims, the women who were girls at the time. I've been critical of the sort of ham-handed attempts to bring all the co-conspirators to justice. But I've certainly always called for justice. How anybody at this stage can believe that it was only Maxwell and Epstein and nobody else, that just doesn't pass the smell test. And now, in the limited redacted files we're seeing, it's becoming ever more clear. And another 40 or 50 million pages that are still being withheld. And in the redactions of what has been released, there's certainly enough information there to force some Department of Justice, whether here or in other countries, to bring charges and finally bring some justice to this story. And when that happens, we're going to see a massive international network of global finance, espionage, and blackmail. So, yeah, I'm late to the party. I admit it. But we have to do everything in our power to bring these men to justice and to take it to where I always take it. Dismantle this abominable system where money equals power and power is unbridled. We have to dismantle the system that created this and allowed for it. I want to point you to some congressional hearings of this week. I know most of us don't have the luxury, the time to sit and watch congressional testimony. And frankly, most of us don't have the stomach for it. But it's damned entertaining, it's informative, and I think for everybody, damned important. So I just want to recommend that you seek out Tuesday's House Committee on Homeland Security hearing. Oversight of DHS, specifically focusing on ICE and CBP. Acting ICE Director Todd Lyons, CBP Commissioner and USCIS Director. You can skip past the Republican questions because they're just throwing softballs. But it might give you some hope in the Democrats. Good Lord, the Democrats. You know how critical we are around here. They do have their moments. Representative Delia Ramirez of Illinois' 3rd said DHS cannot be reformed. It must be dismantled and something new must take its place because if we let DHS persist, it will continue to be a weapon that can be pointed at anyone. Yeah, they had their moments. I try to share stories here with you about the dozens of men and women who have been harassed, abused, injured, and killed. Over 30 now, killed by ICE and CBP. And to their credit, in these hearings, the Dems bring the receipts. And they force these Nazis to sit there and listen to what we know about their crimes. They're going to have their day at Nuremberg, eventually. But there is some satisfaction in watching them have to sit and listen to it. So I recommend go find the highlights. And then on Wednesday of this week, Attorney General Pam Bondi of the Department of Injustice was forced to do the same. All of the regime's witnesses play the same game. They don't answer questions. They insult the members of Congress. They lie every time they open their mouths. But Pam Bondi is the queen of them all. Absolute refusal to answer a single question. Constant attempts to derail the hearing. Over-the-top partisanship to the point of comedy. And multiple insults. This woman, these people, called Jerry Nadler a washed-up loser. And again, she had her notes all prepared. While the member of the committee is asking questions, she's not listening. She's sifting through her voluminous amounts of papers in front of her. She's got them all organized. She finds the dossier on the member questioning. And then when it's her turn to speak, she holds up pictures of immigrants who committed murder in their district, or particular insults carefully prepared for that member. And then when members try to reclaim their time, she just unloads. The shouting, the insults. Just wildly outside of decorum. And that's from me, somebody who doesn't care that much about decorum. Jasmine Crockett did a pretty good job, didn't bother asking her any questions, just forced her to sit and listen for 5 minutes, succinctly laying out the facts. Again, what they're going to have to face at their Nuremberg trials. And believe me, they're going to happen. The regime had a bad week. Starting with Bad Bunny, all the new Epstein revelations, and into these DHS hearings. Yeah, they had a bad week. And we should take a little bit of pleasure in that. Why not? Take it where we can get it. All right. This episode and all episodes can be heard at the website charlespurcell.com or on your favorite podcast platform. Thanks to our flagship terrestrial station, River West Radio in Milwaukee. Follow us on Blue Sky and Substack. Peter Donalds wrote and performed our theme song. All right, this is Charles Purcell. I love you. I'll see you out there.